I'm here with AK. You're
Hi.
first year again. Using or first year here at Madison. So I'm sure you have had a lot of experience, or some experience at least, um, working in groups or doing collaborative projects, working with other people to um, get work done. And in these spaces, we're doing a study on student collaboration in study spaces such as apartments, things like lounges, and like other study spaces.
Yeah,
So, yeah, so how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Good, good, yeah. Yeah, tell me about some of your experiences you've had so far.
Like just in study space on campus?
Yeah, and like how that helps with the collaboration when you're working with other people.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think I personally learn a lot better when I have like a lot of people working on the same problem because everyone has different insights that they can give into the same situation.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, like I like working in the apartment or, I also like sometimes going to the library if I want like a quiet space to work in.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
There are also coffee shops all over campus where you can work if you like that energy. So if you like to drink coffee and you like to work at the same time, that's a good way to get some work done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a question I was like, what types of study spaces are most commonly used for like having a group project or working with other people in your experience?
I mean, it depends a lot on like whether you know the group from before or not. If you know the people from the group before, I think a great way is to just meet someone in their apartment and like work with them over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you don't know anyone in the group, you can always meet in like a common space, like college library or the business library, and you
Mm-hmm.
can get work done there. I believe college library is 24/7 too,
Mm-hmm.
so you can go there literally anytime
Oh
without
yeah,
a meeting.
we're not talking about libraries. We can't talk about libraries at this
Oh,
point.
okay,
Yeah, but yeah, you said like the business school,
business school or
coffee shops, apartments.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Another question is, how do students physically arrange themselves in these spaces, like with the desks and stuff, and like the chairs?
I mean, one way is to just like sit in your own space and get your own personal work done and talk with each other. Another way is to just sit around in a circle and like exchange ideas that way. So similar to like how they work in a discussion group, I believe, because discussion groups are usually are sitting around in a circle and they can exchange ideas a lot that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a common way I see people just organize themselves.
Yeah. So another thing while studying is not even just with collaboration with other people or studying by yourself, but in the realm of talking about collaboration with other people, how do students manage distractions or interruptions from these settings like apartments or lounges and or other study spaces?
I feel like that's a very valid question because a lot of people might get distracted, especially if you're in an apartment and like there are a lot of people who might not be in the same class, just like doing their own things, and that might get distracting. I feel like the best way to deal with it is to honestly just set yourself for a time limit where you have to work regardless of whatever happens outside. And if you do work that time without getting distracted at all, that might be a good way to get some work done. So then you can use the remaining time to like, relax a little bit before you continue working again.
Yeah.
And if you really don't like distractions at all, then there are like ways you can just be in your own room and get work done. Because in that scenario, you don't have to like really have to talk to anyone, and that gives you like a complete control about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's more of an individual study.
Yeah. Yeah. What tools or resources like such as whiteboards, shared screens are frequently used during collaboration in
Yeah,
those settings?
there are a lot of tools that can be used. One of the common ones I've seen is some like Google Docs. That's pretty commonly used because a lot of people take notes there, and you can easily share the notes with one another. Now, I personally take a lot of computer science classes, so a great way to share ideas with one another is using something with like GitHub. That's a good way to like collaborate on projects together. Another thing you can always use is something like if you really like physical like descriptions, then you can use a whiteboard and really like jot down what you like. I think that might be a good way to learn for some people.
Yeah, for sure. Another question is: are there any specific times when these spaces are more heavily used for collaboration? Like, say you have a group project and you have to plan out a time where everyone can meet. Are there specific times for that? Would you say, or
Yeah, that can sometimes be a little tricky, just finding a time everyone is free to like work on some problems together. I feel like the best way you can figure out an exact time that you can work on problems together is to just plan it beforehand, like plan it early on. Because if you plan it last moment, then people will have different things to do, and it'll be really difficult to like find a common time. But if you plan it like a week in advance, then you have a whole week to plan, and then people can like cancel or change their plans accordingly so that they can do the work as well.
mm-hmm. Yeah, moving on to like social interaction questions. During these collaborative projects or activities during in these spaces, how do students divide tasks or responsibilities during group collaboration?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like there isn't, I personally work a lot better when people plan prior to even starting their assignments exactly how they plan to divide the work, because that way everyone knows exactly what they have to personally work on. Otherwise, if it's a free for all, then some people might end up doing like almost all the work, and some people might not do anything, and that might cause an imbalance of workloads, and that might cause difficulties and problems within the group itself. So I feel like it's a lot better if they plan prior to even starting the project exactly how they want to split it. Of course, you can like change it over time because a project is always meant to be like malleable and something that you can change over time. But I think if there's a clear plan beforehand, it makes things a lot easier to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what strategies do students use to resolve conflicts or disagreements in collaborative settings? Like say you have a disagreement in a group, what to do, or maybe you're mad at someone because they didn't do their part. Or what strategies do you use to resolve these conflicts?
I mean, open and honest communication is pretty important. Like just talking to them about what you feel like they should be doing and what they have not done, or explain to them like setting expectations about what we need to do moving forward. That's a great way to like make them understand like how you want to proceed and how the group wants to proceed and how they need to catch up with the group in order to proceed together. So I feel like just talking to them one on one is the best way to like handle these sort of problems in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how do students? I know in collaborative projects, someone it's usually a good idea to have someone take a lead or a lead position. How do students decide who takes the lead in a collaborative project when you're in these type of settings, like when you're all there in like an apartment room or like a study space?
I mean, usually the person who tends to lead the discussion either tends to be someone who knows the most about what's going on, or the person who tends to talk the most often. So, I mean, sometimes that could be a con because it doesn't give the other people a chance to like get their own points across. But usually, I think a group works better if there's one person who does take charge and set times and schedules and stuff. And I think a good way is to just like alternate who takes charge. Like if it's a long project, every week there can be someone else who takes charge. It just like balances the workload a little better. Because if everyone works exactly the same amount together, it can be a little disorienting to figure out exactly what time to meet and what time to like when to do work, what work to do. So if there is like someone who's kind of coordinating the whole thing, that makes things a little easier to like work with.
Yeah, sure. Moving on to like cultural and community questions. In these shared spaces, when you're working with other people on a collaborative project, are there any unspoken rules or norms for behavior? Um, yeah.
That's a good question. I feel like the major rule is just to like listen to other people, what they tell you, and actually like understand the questions they're giving you,
Mm-hmm.
because what problem they have can also be your problem in the future, and what problem you have could also be something they are confused about. So I think that's one of the it's I don't know if it's an unspoken rule per se, but just understanding and listening to other people is pretty important, especially in a group setting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. What role does a sense of community play in motivating students to collaborate in these settings? Um, yeah, like because you could either do it alone, like just email through people, or you can meet up, like actually collaborate in a shared space,
Yeah.
which is what we're researching. So, what does the role of, or what does the sense of community play into that exactly?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So, in a group project, right, you could either have people meet up and do a project in a shared setting, which is what we're researching.
Yeah.
Or you could just simply do your part, email other people about what you did, and then just keep emailing back and then completing the project. So the first thing I said, what we're researching, it has a sense of community in it, right? Because you're around other people in a shared space,
Yeah.
working on something. What does that sense of community play into motivating students to collaborate?
Yeah, it's a good one too. I think like the role of community is like often understated, especially in like group projects, because when you, for example, are working by yourself and you just email them like what you worked on, they get like the idea of what you've done and they can continue from it, but they won't understand exactly what made the decisions you've made so far. And you won't understand if there things you could have done to make it better that they could have thought of earlier on. So by simply splitting the work and doing it by yourself, you each like use only one person for each task. Whereas if you work together and you do all the things together, you all can contribute to every task. So that creates like a lot stronger. That creates a stronger like project. That creates a stronger group bonding, group community, and it also helps in understanding exactly how do you want to proceed with the project because everyone has a clear idea that they can bounce back up each other.
This is a very interesting question. Do students feel more, in your experience, do students feel more comfortable collaborating in certain types of spaces? Like, do they prefer someone's apartment or a public space over others, and why?
I think it depends a lot on the student, but based on the people I know, most people prefer working in a public space over their apartment. I mean, that could be for many reasons. Firstly, like in your own apartment, you tend to like get distracted a lot easier, I guess, because there are a lot of things you can just like figure out to do right around yourself. Like you always have your phone, you always have your computer, you might have your gaming console, you might have friends coming over, and then all of that just gets a little distracting sometimes, especially if you're working in an apartment. However, if you're like outside, then there are very few distracting elements at that point because you all have to work. And I feel like if there's a space that you've designated to do something, it's much easier to use that space for that thing because you tend to think about other things less. So, for example, if you are working on your bed, you just think about sleeping because that's something you associate your bed with, I believe. So, people, that's why I believe, tend to like find a specific space and keep working over there instead of like switching around every now and then because then they can associate that space with work.
Yeah, no, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. How do students accommodate group members with differing schedules or priorities? Like, say someone is not available at the time that you first scheduled in a shared setting. How do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, I think the best case scenario is if everyone manages to find a time where they can all work together. But if that's simply not possible, then I mean, I think the group meeting still has to carry on because you cannot keep waiting forever. So you still have to have the meeting, but you can like give them a brief like rundown as to what happened in the meeting, so they're not completely lost the next time they come in, and they know what's going on at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to technical or technological questions. How do students incorporate technology into their collaboration in these shared spaces? For example, like video calls, shared documents, etc.
Yeah, both those things are like used really often. Like video calls are really useful because it gives a great way for people to meet when they simply cannot make it to the same space. It's an alternative to collaboration because you can still bounce off ideas of one another, but you don't have to exactly be in the exact same space. Because as we were talking before, like everyone has a different space that they consider to be their study area. Like like let's say I personally enjoy studying in my room, but someone else prefers studying in a public space. So if we meet in one of the other spaces, like one of us is like not the most comfortable with that setting. So if you can use video calls, then you both are comfortable talking in your respective study spaces. So it's a great way to like minimize that difficulty. It also helps manage different schedules, different time zones, and you can still communicate with one another. Shared documents is another equally important thing because that's just another way to share ideas with one another. So yeah, both those things are used really often, especially in the work I do.
Yeah, for sure. Computer science major, I understand. Um, some physical environment questions. How does lighting, noise level, and temperature affect collaboration in these spaces? Like start off with lighting. How does that affect
Mm.
your the work?
Yeah, I think good lighting is obviously better than like if it's dully lit or if there's like really bright lights or neon lights, not neon lights, the LED, uh, the RGB lighting. I feel like that can cause a little distraction compared to a nice like warm light setting,
Mm-hmm.
because that just makes, like personally I associate like the RGB lighting with like gaming or like hanging out with my friends, whereas like the lighting in this room, for example, is a lot more like work oriented because like I can focus over here a lot better.
Yeah. What about noise level?
Well, yeah, personally, I don't like it to be dead solid, but I think I'm in the minority with that. Like some people, I think most of the people I know prefer like complete silence when they work. I like a little bit of background noise, otherwise I get like a little nervous about like doing my work.
Yeah, especially in a collaborative project, I think
Exactly.
some noise would be nice. You don't want to just sit
Sit
there
there
in silence.
silently.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. How about temperature?
Temperature, I mean, something that's like good for
Yeah,
almost everyone, right?
that's
I
pretty
guess. Yeah.
self-explanatory. Yeah, yeah. Another like pretty interesting question is what features of the environment, such as furniture or decor, support or hinder collaboration?
Well, I mean, a lot of chairs, I guess that would help quite a bit.
Yeah,
Like a lot of seating areas would help. A larger table would help because then a lot of people can put on their own work in the table and not have it be cluttered. So those two things can definitely help. Something that can hinder it, I'd assume like the bed can probably hinder your work because if there's a bed around you, you'd probably just want to like lie down, right? I
yeah,
think that could be something that hinders you a little bit.
yeah. How does the availability of nearby amenities like coffee or like snacks around or restrooms influence students' choice of space? Do you take that into account or not really?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think having like a place where you can get snacks nearby, for me especially having coffee nearby, those are like pretty useful things. I mean, right now that I live in an apartment, it's a lot easier. But when you live in a dorm, for example, just having a place you can go down, grab a snack, grabbing some gum, it just helps you like relax a little bit when you work, I believe. So that can help.
Yeah, for sure. We want to like behavior questions, individual. How do students prepare for collaboration before arriving in these spaces?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like before you ever show up for a group meeting, you should always have something to add and something to take away. So when you go in, you should always have something in your mind to say. Now, you don't have to know everything because that's the whole point of having a group project, that you can bounce off ideas. But you should still have some idea of what's going on in the class and some questions maybe if you want to ask a group. So you should have like some idea what you want to talk about when you go there.
Yeah. Bouncing off that question, what motivates students to collaborate in these spaces rather than working alone? Like say in your group project, you had those two options, either
Yeah.
working alone through email and just hoping they email back, or having um, everyone be in a group setting and working together. So what motivates students to choose that option rather than just working alone?
I mean, firstly, you get an immediate response when you work with someone else. Like you say something and they immediately talk back. So that creates like a flow of conversation, something that you can keep in mind. However, if you send someone an email and they respond back in like 6 hours, like there's just like a delayed response time, and that can cause like for example, if you're working 3 hours and you send it once and they come back 6 hours later, and you just don't feel like working the rest of the day, that might cause a lot of delays as well. So working together definitely can get things done a lot quicker.
Yeah, for sure. What are some challenges or frustrations students commonly encounter in these group collaboration settings?
Mm. Well, I mean, as we discussed, one of the challenges can definitely be like distractions around them. Like if someone, for example, opens up their phone and looks at some content, and then that distracts everyone else around them because they all start thinking about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Having spaces that they consider to not really be study spaces can also be a distraction. Like I talked about beds or I think really high noise levels can be a big distraction,
Mhm.
because if someone's like really like talking really loud next to you, that can cause you to like wander off course from what where you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
So those are a couple of things that can definitely cause some challenges when you're working together.
Yeah. So that was actually my last question. So
Perfect.
we reached the time limit that I had set. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a good day.
You
and,
too.
have a good week.